All right. You want to get started?
Yeah, so let's go ahead and go around the room, and we can actually start with everyone on Teams. If you could just introduce yourself and say whom you're with.
Shall I start?
Sure.
Okay, I'm Paul Donnelly with Donnelly and Gross. I'm speaking to you from Gainesville, Florida, and the comfort of my dining room table. Jim Brantley is partner in our firm, and he's talking to you from Fort Myers and the comfort of his office. But I'll probably be the one doing all the talking, and Jim's just probably going to listen in. Thank you.
Oh, Janice Gilly, Administrator.
Kristen Huell with the County Attorney's Office.
Jana Still, County HR.
Jason Rogers, Public Safety Director.
Paul Williams, Interim Fire Chief.
Lorraine Hudson, Clerk of Court Payroll.
Vicki Powell, Clerk of Court Payroll.
Adam Harrison, Fire Department member, union member.
Nick Radio, 4131.
Dan Brask, 4131.
Scott Hunsucker, 4131.
Okay.
Okay, so we're here today. I mean, we received the letter to demand letter to bargain. So one of the first things I do want to start off by saying is I know this has been an arduous process and kind of ongoing, but it's not like we were ignoring anything and sitting on it. I mean, there has been actionable things. We requested an opinion from the Department of Labor. We don't control how long they take, nor do we control whether or not they choose to give one. They said no thanks, but did make the recommendation that we contact our local wage and hour division to see if they would give us an opinion or any kind of advice there. We did do that as well, and it was kind of at the height of COVID, so their offices kind of shut down and they weren't very responsive. Can y'all hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Paul, yes.
Okay, sorry. So long and short of it, we kind of exhausted every element that we could until we really did make a good faith effort to garner other opinions from higher entities, because this is, we know, not a clear-cut issue. So we are here in good faith today, and what we're basically here, y'all have asked that we be at the table, so we're here to hear what y'all have to say in terms of what you feel y'all do, what you feel makes you non-exempt versus exempt, and kind of any other information regarding this that you would like to provide us. So we're going to turn it over to you.
All right, I think I'll lead it off. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Great. I'm going to, after I do this lead off, I'm going to turn it over to Adam, who will kind of more specifically get us into the weeds about the job duties and whatnot that establish that the chiefs are not exempt from overtime. And I will tell you, it wouldn't surprise me in this environment that we're in and with the pandemic and all that stuff, that we may never really hear from the wage and hour division on this, or it may be so long from now that it just is not productive for anybody. And so I think the parties are going to have to come to a solution and probably won't be able to have the benefit of the Department of Labor's wage and hour division weighing in. It's really been pending for quite a long time, and we wanted to make sure we got everybody to the table to roll up our sleeves to bring the issue to closure. There are two ways, and we really believe that it makes a lot of sense for management and the union to work this out and come to an agreement that's mutually acceptable, rather than the litigation or the impasse record. It seems that ultimately if the parties wind up in impasse or, quite frankly, litigation in a federal lawsuit, we should not do that. No one should have to go through all that process. It's just an expenditure of time, money, and energy. we felt, the union felt it made sense to just roll up our sleeves now and use this forum to get this resolved. The chiefs are really not interested in getting into a lawsuit when it really makes total sense to negotiate and use this process and only be involved in litigation or impasse as a last resort. I would tell you that our firm has looked in detail at this case, or this potential case. We're hoping we can get this resolved and not have a case. Several lawyers in the firm we are all focused on labor and employment law and have done so for decades and handled numerous FLSA matters, both in getting them resolved and in litigating them. Minimum wage overtime matters and matters involving exemptions, particularly in the fire service and in the other public safety functions, such as police and corrections. We also had one of the leading law firms on Fair Labor Standards Act overtime cases analyze this as well. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. And we all came to the unanimous conclusion that on the facts here, which exist, which Adam will probably be even better at going over than I will, that there is absolutely no way that if a case winds up in federal court, there's no way that the county will be able to have that case thrown out on summary judgment. In other words, the facts are such that we believe there is a virtual certainty that the judge will not throw the case out, and instead the case will be decided all the way through a jury trial. Any appeal would not be successful unless the judge did something wrong in the trial, seated a jury that was improper or something like that. But we don't see in any of the lawyers in my firm, nor in the national level firm that we asked to examine this case as well, we don't see any chance that if the employees are forced to take the case to trial, that if they win a jury verdict, which we think is a substantial likelihood, that it would ever be overturned on appeal. Again, absent after the judge doing some sort of procedural thing, which is usually, this doesn't happen very often. With that, I'd like to turn it over to and maybe if you have any questions, comments based on what I've said, and then turn it over to Adam. Thank you.
You guys have any questions? Yes. Thanks. So a little history for this for everybody that may not know where this or how this came about. This process actually started when a gentleman by the name of Tom Turner was here. Some of you may have known Tom or worked with Tom. He was a past HR director for Escambia County, and he was reviewing a lot of different job descriptions. And at a time, it was, you'll have to excuse me, I don't remember the exact date with which Tom Turner and I spoke, but he had come into my office when I was the logistics chief and said, hey, we're reviewing these job classifications, and I just wanted to let you know ahead of time that more than likely you're going to be considered managerial because you're here in the office. However, the people out on the street are not, so there's going to be a difference in overtime and not overtime. He was trying to be polite and discuss that with me. I said, okay, understood. And I waited for him to do his analysis, and unfortunately during that time, Tom quit, resigned. I'm not exactly sure what the final conclusion was, how he left, but he did leave, and unfortunately did not finish the study or give a reason as to how he came to his conclusion. So fast forward to when Mr. Kleiner took his role as the HR director. I sent him an email, and that was dated 9/26 of 2018. And with Mr. Kleiner, I asked him for his opinion and basically kind of talked to him briefly in the email, and then I followed it up with a phone call and talked to him briefly about the FLSA ruling, how it applied to us, if he could research it again to find out where Mr. Turner was with it, and if he could render an opinion. There were several emails exchanged back and forth with him. After that, I believe it went to JD or John Dosh. At that time, Mr. Kleinert stepped down, retired. I'm not exactly sure how he left the organization, but he left, and then Ms. Stallworth got involved for a short amount of time. There was some emails exchanged back and forth with her. She was going to work with us for a little while. She was a little concerned with, didn't know how long her tenure was going to be in that position, and she was waiting to see when the next HR director was going to be involved, which is now Ms. Still. And then I sent Ms. Still an email. Actually, there were several emails back and forth, but there was an email requesting some information from her and her position or the county's position as to how they came up with or how they decided that we were considered exempt, which is why we're here. So that was roughly a year ago that email, within a month or two, about a year ago that email was sent, trying to look for some clarification from your perspective is how we landed in being an exempt or non-exempt role. So the way that, any questions on that, how we got here, or how long it's been since we got here?
3 years.
Yeah, it's been 3 years.
The only point of clarification I would like to make
Sure.
is that within less than 2 months of me being here, there was movement on this, which had never happened before. No other person had requested an opinion letter for the Department of Labor. So from the get-go, we were taking it seriously. So as soon as I found out about it, as soon as it was brought to Ms. Gillies' attention, we were like, yeah, why don't we do this? In conjunction with the county attorney's office, so.
I understand your perspective, yes. So how did we come to this conclusion? Obviously, without getting much input from y'all's side as to how you came to that conclusion, I started doing some more research on my own, and then reaching out. I also reached out to the Department of Labor. They also did not return my phone calls. They do not like rendering opinions. Obviously, in my opinion, if they were going to render opinions, there'd be no point in me having an attorney. So they were unwilling to render an opinion. We reached out to the Wage and Hour Division, and they also did not return several phone calls. And that was well over a year ago. So by saying that, I understand, and my perspective is that you're not going to hear anything, much like Paul Donnelly said. You're not going to hear anything from those groups of individuals. I don't think it's their job to render opinions as it is to direct you what the law states and for you to form your own opinion. So with that, we came up and I started looking through the things that made people exempt and non-exempt. And through the things that I found, for the most part, we do not fit the managerial description as it relates to the FLSA. There's specific laws as it states in the FLSA that first responders don't qualify for that exemption. Furthermore, what made it even stand out further is that when we filed with PERC, sorry, Paul, we missed him. Paul, you still there? Looks like people are dropping off. There we go. Okay. We had filed with PERC, and just a couple things that kind of backed that up that made it even more clear to me was there was a notice that was filed with PERC, and it looked like this, and I believe Mr. Kleinert's the one that sent it out. And it specifically states in here there's positions that he's seeking that states this is a request for a designation of certain employees as managerial or confidential. So this is basically stating that their job duties are mostly managerial in function, and this is why we're trying to classify them as managerial employees versus us. And so, and specifically it states Battalion Chief of Logistics and Battalion Chief Training Section Manager. So those were the two positions that PERC and the state were, and you guys were trying to deem as managerial positions versus non-managerial positions. And that's how we got into the meeting with PERC. We filed with PERC. There was a letter that was sent out I actually have a copy of it. It'd take me a second to read it. But basically what the letter states is that, and this was a joint letter from Escambia County and our attorney.
I think you're speaking of a joint stipulation that was entered, that was filed
From
in the,
PERT.
in the PERT case.
Correct.
On the
And-
petition that the union filed.
Right. Your attorney's name was on it as well, Mattamore's.
So was mine.
Right. So I'm just saying is y'all had wrote in there, and I'm assuming that by signing it, you guys were agreeing to what was in that letter. In other words, you agreed to what was in the letter and the way that it was stated. Is that correct?
It's called a joint stipulation.
Right.
Right.
So they agree with the
So
language.
you agree with the language
But
that's
you
in the
also
letter.
understand that that was an action under PIRA, and PIRA has a definition of a managerial employee, and that's entirely separate and apart from the FLSA.
No, I understand that,
They're
but
two
what I'm,
separate analyses.
understood. But it shows that we're more managerial, and I'm about to get to why we come to that. And in there, it specifically states that we are more like lieutenants and firemen than a managerial person such as that was listed in this. And the reasoning for that is that we run the calls, that we sleep in the fire stations, we help cleaning the fire stations, we help maintaining the fire stations, we help doing the truck checks. In other words, it shows that we're out there doing blue collar type stuff versus the white collar type stuff. And that was, from my opinion, self-admitted in that by both parties that yes, we agree that you guys as the battalion chiefs do those types of actions. And we spend a large majority of our time doing it. Therefore, that's why that letter was written. So that was one of the things that kind of stood out to me in there. And like you said, it's deemed or quoted as managerial in that section of the law. And that's where we were looking at that as saying we've all claimed that we are not managers. We act more in the part of line personnel. And once again, we go to significant house fires. MVAs were required to be physically fit. We're required to do the same thing that the firemen are, that the lieutenants are. We have no authority as it relates to hiring or firing personnel. As it relates to SOGs, we have the same input that a fireman has, that a lieutenant has. So as it relates to policies and procedures, they can put those in place as well or have suggestions to those SOGs just like we would. So in other words, they hold the same weight. So that's where we were looking with perspective, and we were just trying to see how you guys came to the conclusion or how you felt that we did not meet that criteria.
So part of it's predicated off the existing job description, and there's nothing in the existing job description that says that you are expected to, as battalion chiefs, to, what you said, sleep in the fire station, clean the stations, do vehicle checks. It's almost all, it starts off, the job description reads as follows, just a little blurb overview. Provides leadership and direction to and manages multiple supervisors and or programs within the fire rescue department. Responds to emergency incidents to provide command and control. May be assigned to direct and manage a section within fire rescue facilitating the implementation and management of significant department-wide programs. And in terms of action verbs, almost every action verb utilized is plans, supervise, coordinates, leads, organizes, oversees, monitors. These are all managerial type action verbs that would be utilized. So the job specification itself holds and bears a lot of weight. So that was one of the logics behind it.
Okay. Paul, do you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank the other gentleman.
Jim, did you have anything you wanted to say so far?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to not what a job description says people are doing in their classification, but rather a test and what the facts show is actually being done.
I agree with that.
And so that's,
You also spoke to what, and maybe it's just the way you said it, but you said the current job description. I don't know, does that allude to the job description will change? Because I know there was some work done or being done specifically related to like the fire marshal, battalion chief of logistics, battalion chief of training. Some of those were being broken out to specifically identify the qualifications that are specific to those jobs, right?
So those discussions were had. I just said current job description just to make it known to everyone here that that is the existing job description that is in existence today. There's no.
So I guess with that being said, are you open to discussions to changing that, or are you still firm in your stance that you want to keep it? Because I guess that's where the rubber kind of meets the road is, are we open for conversation into changing that? And if so,
So
The
where
job
do we go
description
from
also
here?
doesn't include a lot of the work that they do as it stands. But they do those things to contribute to the overall success of the department. You know, so it's silly to get into the minutia of, well, I'm not going to do this because it specifically doesn't say I have to. And that's kind of ridiculous.
And that's not what we're saying. I'm just saying that
Sure.
a lot of it's predicated off of the fact because your job description is supposed to set the expectation of your job. And the expectation based off this job description is that you are to operate as more of a managerial function. Now, it is true that the test is going to be the duties test with what you're actually doing, but that also is predicated off of what you should be doing versus actually doing. And there's all kinds of things that go to that, but. And we're open to hearing any ideas that y'all have, because at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that the fire department is ran as efficiently and effectively as possible, and that the personnel are there and that they're treated fairly, to be honest with you.
right. And that's our concern as well, is because currently the way that we are and have been operating, in my opinion, does not meet the exempt criteria. The job description may or may not, and that's not what I'm debating. I'm debating what we actually do and have been doing for many years does not, in my opinion, meet the exempt criteria. And so that's why we're kind of here, and that's why I've been asking for many years, can we reevaluate this? Because regardless of what that says, what we're doing is something completely different. And that's kind of where I was going with the description that we kind of mutually agreed upon earlier, is that, hey, we've all agreed that this is actually what we're doing, but that's not what the job description says. So where do we go from here to meet that middle ground to figure out what are we going to come up with? Are we going to be exempt? Are we not going to be exempt? And if we're going to be exempt, why are we? And what are the expectations from that point forward? So.
I think
So,
that's fair.
yeah, and that is fair. And two of the things that, I know it's kind of the waiting game, one of the things that we were waiting on was to get a new permanent public safety director in. Thanks, Jason. And also, it's happening now to get a new permanent fire chief in, because I think that the two people who are going to take this moving forward we should garner their opinion and insight into what they feel like currently exists and how we can better move forward. So those conversations were most definitely going to be had anyways, but part of the part of it was we were waiting for a permanent director, and now we're waiting for a permanent chief, and we are actively recruiting for that position as we speak.
And please excuse my bluntness, but that's been the same answer that I've heard from everybody. Turner quit, and then Kleiner, and then he had to review it and spend some time doing it. Then he quit. Then Paulette didn't want to make a decision because she was new and somebody was coming in. Then you came in and you're deferring to when he comes in. Now you're deferring to when the
Yeah.
fire chief comes in. It's always a defer.
And the previous chief and the previous HR
Yeah, and
director
it's
and the
like-
previous public safety director.
While you're
That's
deferring,
things.
I understand what you're saying, but our job description has not changed, and we're still continuing to do those things from the very get-go. And that's why we're trying to figure out, like, okay, I get it. I understand that there may be another direction. There may be something else but that's been for 3 years now over. And it's like, okay, so can you please sit down with us and describe where we want to go from here?
Yeah, and let me add to that. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're
Go ahead,
good.
Paul.
Okay, thank you. I want to add to that, I guess what I admire is really irrelevant, but I'll say it, I'll just talk briefly. I admire the chiefs for their patience and their approach here of of trying to get this worked out. Because you know, the way that, I know the lawyers know this, but for those who may not be familiar, the way this law works is you can go back and get back pay going back 2 years and 3 years for a willful violation. We think this is willful. Not making any accusations, I'm just saying that's how we analyze this as objectively as we can. So we're looking at 3 years of back pay, and then the law gives double damages. They're called liquidated damages, so plus attorney's fees and costs. And I admire them for not going that step, but they really have been patient quite a bit too long, really. And what we really do need to see is if y'all are willing to put a timetable to this, we move this forward. And if we see substantial progress being made, we can hold off on all that other stuff. Again, their desire is to get this worked out. But it's really going to be something that we need to move forward and have a method of moving it forward. And so we're curious about whether y'all open to that.
So define moving it forward.
We need to have meetings, we need to roll up our sleeves, and we need to make decisions. My suggestion would be is we have a schedule.
So again, I see what you're saying, and this really isn't passing the buck in that the fire chief posting is currently posted, and the plan is to close it in a week, but it is going to depend on the quality of applicants we get. But the long and short of it, we're currently in the process of recruiting for that position and anticipate hiring it relatively soon. And one of the first directives of the fire chief will be to work in conjunction with all of us, including the battalion chiefs, to determine what will be the best structure for the fire department moving forward. What exists now through their observation, and what will be the best to move forward. So that forward thinking, the forward idea is we're actively trying to get there.
One of my concerns is, and while I respect that comment, I think it's unfair for a new fire chief to come in and within a month try and make a decision on where he wants his fire department to go. It took each one of us many, many months to figure out this organization and its idiosyncrasies and the way that it functions. And in fairness to the new fire chief, whoever that may be, I think it's going to be quite some time before he can pinpoint how he wants that to happen. And in the meantime, we're still not getting paid appropriately, in my opinion. So that is my concern, is it draws this whole thing out many, many more months. And that's the reason that we're here, is we've had many, many years. And it's the same thing over and over again.
You make a very valid point, because I will say this, you contacted me after I'd been here for less than a month.
Mm-hmm.
So same logic applies. It's really not fair to expect the brand new HR director who'd been here for less than a month and was thrown into a lot of other turmoil to be able to make that observation, research, and decision in a short time frame. One of the things we did start off doing was deflecting to the Department of Labor, because honestly, I didn't know why that hadn't been done yet from
Sure.
the HR should have recommended a while ago, but whatever. And then we've had a lot of really, hate to use the excuse, but just like random circumstances that nobody could have foreseen. COVID significantly shifted and shaped a lot of the things that we have going on. And we have multiple departments. It's not, public safety is a very vital, important department, but there are multiple departments that we're dealing with and reviewing with. And so with COVID, then the hurricanes, I mean, we can't catch a break.
Well,
And I know y'all know that.
I know, and you said this, in this joint stipulations, in support of granting unit clarification petition, you helped write this.
I believe my name's on the signature block, isn't it?
Correct. And I'm saying you helped write it, you just didn't sign your name to it.
I'm
And so you
well aware of
guys,
the
right,
document.
you guys worked together, and you just stated basically that our job description doesn't reference that, where clearly it states in here that battalion chiefs cook, eat, and clean the fire stations and their apparatus together with their subordinates. Battalion chiefs participate in high-risk pension plan like lieutenants and firefighters. They regularly respond to emergencies like fire incidents, auto accidents, medical calls, share the hazards of the job. Battalion chiefs are issued protective bunker gear, breathing apparatus, They work a 24/48 shift, just like the people within their unit. The parties agree and stipulate that substantial changes in the classification of battalion chiefs make it appropriate for battalion chiefs to be included in the supervisory unit through unit clarification petition because they no longer satisfy the managerial employee designation. And because there is no supervisory conflict of interest which outweighs a community of interest shared among the employees. This was written by the county and shared.
Again, just for clarification, that was all based upon the terms used in Chapter 447 under the Public Employees Relations Act.
Right, yeah.
So-
Well, and like Janet just said, it's not listed anywhere in our job description, but the county clearly identified that as what we do.
Yes, you are correct, and that was based upon the information that the attorneys were given from HR and from the department, from
Right,
Public
but
Safety at
again,
that time, and the director was Eric Kleiner.
Everybody agreed that this is what we do.
Yes, as represented in that.
Right, and that's all we're trying to say is that, and I think we're kind of
Yeah.
debating the same thing here. We all agree that that's what we do. We're
Which is
wondering
not
how
managerial.
it makes us exempt, and I understand where you're going from here, and I could only imagine, and the fire chief and public safety director are here, I could only imagine that they probably feel the same way, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, so you're more than welcome to jump in. If I would think that there's going to be people potentially in this organization above us at some point. We already have an assistant chief. I would think that there's going to be more assistant chiefs potentially in the future. We're talking about the new fire chief, the direction he wants to travel, stuff like that.
I know, but you said we already have an assistant chief.
We
For
do.
Career firefighters, do y'all have one?
Volunteer.
We're all one combination department.
Yeah, unification plan.
Yep. So we have one assistant chief now. My assumption is that we'll have more, which puts the spread even further between the managerial process and the line people. So that's one of the things that I see potentially coming down the pipe. Once again, I'm not putting words in their mouth. I'm just projecting a vision of many other fire departments throughout the continental U.S., and that's how they function and operate. So I would think that we would be going down the same avenue at some point, whenever that may be, but that would just widen the spread there between managerial duties and line personnel.
So let me pipe in if I may.
Sure.
So look, let me tell you the way what we have here. I've got these chiefs who right now and for the last 3 years should be paid time and a half for all hours worked over 40. Period. They're not exempt. Right now, they should be paid overtime. They're being treated as exempt. So there's 3 ways they can get that problem fixed. One is filing a lawsuit, which I've already described for you. Number 2 is using the bargaining process and going to impasse. And the 3rd is also using the bargaining process, and that's coming to the table, meeting at reasonable times and places, and making progress and reaching an agreement. That's the approach they want to take. I've been representing the firefighters all around Florida for almost 30 years, and Jim Brantley has retired from a career in the fire service as a district chief, and served as a fire commissioner for a fire district. And he'll correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't think I've seen a new chief come in, even ones that come to the job from being promoted within the fire department, where they've already had a career within the fire department, they just move up the ranks to be chief. I haven't seen a situation where any quicker than 6 months, it's usually more than a year or more before the chief really has his or her feet on the ground and really understands the situation to be able to conceptualize changes and new directions for the department to take. There's a pretty substantial, these people are highly professional, there's a very substantial learning curve, and that's not going to work for us. Just quite frankly, we're going to need to solve the problem of how they're being paid now for what they do, and quite frankly, we may need to also discuss back pay. But we need to move that. We're not going to be able to wait. It's an existing problem that can be solved now. Now, we can certainly work towards solutions for the new chief in the future and look forward to that. But we just can't, we're just not in a position to really wait. So we're gonna have to get some game plan that the parties can move forward on these discussions productively. Thank you.
Can I say something here?
Sure.
Yeah, of course.
That I would kind of turn around the current thinking and view it another way. And that is, we have evidence of what these chiefs are doing now in their daily routine. Setting aside what the description says they thought they were going to be doing or whatever it is, we've known for a while what it is they do because we've filed joint stipulations with PERC indicating we both recognize what it is they're doing. So I don't think, I would say if the new chief coming aboard and the new chief at some point after coming aboard views the department structure and says, well, we need to change the structure, and at that time wants to change what the battalion chiefs are doing, to say, no, I want them doing this other role that's going to substantially change their duties from what they are today. And as such, at that time, if they no longer meet the qualifications for overtime, or they suddenly qualify for an exemption based on those changes, I think that's the time to have the discussion and come to the table. I think the question now is, the evidence before us is that the job duties are not managerial or administrative in nature now. They're far more rank and file or blue collar, as it was described earlier. And so the question is, how can we get this resolved now, having waited 3 years? And then when the new chief is aboard and the new public safety director is aboard, and down the road there may be some discussion about restructuring the department and putting these chiefs into a different role at that time that clearly qualifies them, changes their duties such that they qualify for the exemption. I think that's the time we can come back and readdress it. The question is, we now know what's going on today. What can we do? What plan can we put in place to address this now, short of some kind of protracted litigation?
I do have a question. From the career firefighting side, as it stands today, now, in terms of positions filled, is there an intermediary between a battalion chief and the fire chief?
Yeah, the deputy chief.
So the person who is also serving as the fire chief is serving as the deputy chief?
And you would say the logistics chief or the battalion chief of training, which are clearly defined in there as managerial. You separated us between those two. So
Right.
within your own language, you have those people here.
For example,
And
if he
they've
takes-
served as the
sorry.
fire chief in the fire chief's absence. Those are your employees, yes.
Exactly. So when he takes off on annual leave or something of that nature, he would place the training chief in charge, or he would place the logistics chief in charge, not us.
And I see what you're saying, but my question was in terms of classifications and how it stands today. But does it go in terms of filled roles, battalion chief, fire chief, the deputy fire chief position? Well, I guess it's technically filled, but you're an interim. So one way or the other, there's no intermediary, there's not a physical person in between that.
Well, not
The
right
whole-
now.
Not right now, but
Because
that's
that was the county's
not
decision.
trying to be
That was
disrespectful, but that's what y'all's
clarification
making,
for me.
not ours. I mean, that's,
Okay.
Yeah. We've never acted in the fire chief's role, we've never done that. And one of the primary reasons why the battalion chiefs were never in the unit when the unit was first formed, it was because of the fact there wasn't a deputy chief of the department at the time. Once there was a deputy chief department at the time, and then as it's written in
Yeah, I
this
saw in the
language,
joint stipulation.
you guys clearly separated and differentiated between the different battalion chiefs. So stating that the person that works in the logistics role is managerial along with the training. So there is a difference. You've clearly defined that difference and outlined that difference within this language as well. That's why there is a difference. That's why they're not in the union and we are in the union. So within your own ruling, again, you have clearly stated that we are not managerial because of that. You separated us from managerial battalion chiefs.
Is there something that perhaps we can clarify that you don't understand that is leaning your perspective into why we're exempt? I guess I'm having a hard time bridging the gap as to figuring out your stance, because we've given you ours, but I really haven't heard your side as to why you feel we are. Other than our job description, which we both clearly stated is not correct.
So how many, my understanding is at any given time, there's 2 battalion chiefs on a shift, correct?
Correct.
But there are way more than 2 fire stations. So how many fire stations is each battalion chief responsible for?
They differ slightly, but probably 7.
6 and 7. One's in charge of 6, the other's in charge of 7.
Okay.
Well, and then when there's a daytime crew, Monday through Friday, you're technically 7.
Okay.
Yeah. 7 and 7.
So because what I'm used to seeing in terms of structure is you've got captains who are responsible for, they are the lead officer, the company officer for each station. And then your battalion and or district chief would be over a subset of stations. So from a logical standpoint, even though the captain role isn't readily fulfilled that way, a lot of the lieutenants operate as company officers, if you will, of a station. And so you've got battalion chiefs that are not necessarily assigned to one station to serve in that operational capacity as company officer. They're serving in more of a overarching managerial role of overseeing the day-to-day operations. Because no one's arguing that you don't oversee day-to-day operations. You're more operational.
Change in nomenclature. City's captain is our lieutenant. We feel
I'm not
the same-
focusing on the names. I'm talking about the role. The company officer, as it stands now,
Right, a
who is
company officer
dedicated.
for us is a lieutenant. Name
Correct.
aside,
Correct.
the role is filled.
Correct.
I'm responsible for my house, and then I answer to one of these 2 when they're on. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's just nomenclature. It's not.
That's the point I'm making, though. Battalion chiefs are not company officers.
Correct.
They're over.
But they
Multiple
still
stations.
respond to
With the-
fires.
with
they
the
still
same-
go in
with the
buildings.
same-
I'm just asking for
No,
clarification.
that is correct. Yes, you're correct. Small and short, yes. Just like he's in charge of 2 to 3 firemen. So yes,
How many firemen is each battalion chief responsible for in terms of your direct report,
none.
or fire lieutenants, my bad?
That's all right.
No, see?
I
How
got
many
it.
fire lieutenants?
6 or 7.
So you are readily assigned about 6 or 7 folks that you directly supervise, and then they also directly supervise a subset of people.
Correct.
So you've got the indirect supervision of firefighters, indirectly.
Yes. So I'll go back to my question again. What is your position, and why do you consider us exempt? And if you're not, it's okay to say that and just say, hey, we don't really know, we haven't, I mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful,
No, it's
I'm not.
That is, like, that, our main purpose today was to kind of hear what y'all had to say in terms of like why y'all felt like y'all
Sure.
did not meet the exemption.
And then honestly, that's why we're here, is because I think it's fair for you to say, and please, I'm not putting words in your mouth or trying to be disrespectful, but I think it's fair for you to say that we didn't know.
Well,
That's why Tom Turner was working on it, because he didn't know. That's why he came to me and said, hey, I think we've messed up here. You're fixing to be this and you're fixing to be this, because he readily identified that.
so here's another problem that I will say did happen. This is not a blame game, it's really not, but
Sure.
under Tom Turner's purview, which you mentioned, he made several adjustments to people's classifications in terms of their FLSA status. And we are still currently going through them and looking some of the changes, a lot of the changes that were made both ways, and the payroll office can attest to this, were not done correctly. People are incorrectly labeled. We're finding more people who are actually labeled non-exempt who should be exempt. But long and short of it, I understand what you're saying in terms of you had an HR director tell you, hey, this is what I think. But that same HR director also made several other changes that we are finding do not meet the qualifications within the bounds of the FLSA law.
And whether he was right or wrong really doesn't play a role in this. It just highlighted for me to start looking into what exactly that meant. So when I started looking, I agreed with actually what he was saying once I started reading the law, and that's when I started asking questions.
And I get that, but it's predicated off of his determination. And so I've looked at what he had, what I've been presented. I don't know
Right.
that I have everything. I've tried to dig through stuff to find, but what I've been presented, what he had, would not still been substantial enough to change your exemption. So I don't know, not knowing his thought pattern and what else he had, that's all I had to go off of in terms of trying to figure out where he came to that.
No, I understand it. And like I said, in fairness to him, it doesn't matter what he thought or did. Here's where we are. Here's what we are. What is your perspective? So that's what I'm trying to get at. It doesn't matter what Tom Turner thought. It doesn't matter what Kleinert thought. It doesn't matter what Paulette Stallworth thought. Here's where we are. Here's what we do. How do you view it now? And that's really how I'm just,
No, so based off the information
Right.
that I've received, the information garnered over less than the year that I've been here, because your own attorney made the point that even a fire chief who dedicates himself to the fire department still would need over 6 months. So I cannot
Sure.
dedicate myself to the fire department.
I understand.
And it's not a solo, this wasn't just me. But based off the information given to me, the information reviewed, the different cases, we dived into case law as well. There's no clear authority that has come down and said one way or the other, which makes it even more difficult. So I do get that. But based off everything I've seen and what has been given to me and reviewed, it appears that the battalion chiefs, line or not, qualify under the executive and administrative exemption.
so that is your stance, is that we still remain exempt.
I guess you can call it a stand. That's what I'm saying is what I've reviewed, what has been presented to me thus far, bearing anything different, that is what it appears. That's the appearance that it gives. Is that both of those criteria
And
are
what
both.
specifically in there, in that research, leads you to believe that it appears that that's what's taken place? Because there's usually thresholds somewhere in there that says you have to spend more time doing this or you have to be doing that. So what specifically are you looking at that leans you to making that decision?
So for both criteria, executive and administrative, there's tests. It's a three-prong for both, actually, four-prong for one of them. Based off of that, what I've seen and given, it meets those criteria. So it hits all the prongs for executive and administrative. And it doesn't even have to hit both of them, it just has to hit one or the other.
So I guess my point from here is we need to find out if we're going to be able to work on common ground or if we're not.
So I do have
Because-
another point of clarification. I really do.
Sure.
With the line chiefs, when the battalion chiefs respond to calls, do they take incident command?
Sometimes, sometimes not.
When they don't take it, who takes it?
Usually the first arriving company officer establishes command.
Correct.
It'd be a lieutenant. It could
Which
be
would
the
be a
first,
lieutenant.
It could be the second.
Could be a
Yeah, just
volunteer officer as
Correct.
well.
Could be a volunteer.
But by the time, so the highest ranking officer that arrives on scene, do you not take that?
Not
No.
always.
You don't transfer the command?
No.
Not always.
More often than not? Why, okay, so.
It's
why-
case dependent.
Yeah,
so I mean,
what
it's
would
hard
be
to
a
ask.
reason to not transfer the command?
Well, a prime example would be our geographic regions.
Uh-huh.
Here's a prime example. Pensacola Beach, we had a fire 3 watches ago. In reality, I didn't need to take command. It was de-escalating by the time I arrived out there. I was 40 minutes is my response time from here to Pensacola Beach because of the bridges. It was in de-escalation mode at that point. So if the person that was managing the scene and then it was de-escalating or coming down from there was doing a good job, and he's already basically almost done with it, for lack of better terms, for just simpleman's terms, I may just stand there next to him and supervise and make sure that the tasks are completed. When I say supervise, just listening to him and making sure that he's met the certain points. I may not take it from him. It may not be needed. It may be, hey, you're handling this just fine. I'm going to turn around and be available for my other 40-minute drive back in case something happens on the north end. So it's not always that we would transfer command, and it's very case dependent, depending on what's going on with the situation. Much like you in your office, I mean, can you handle this? Yes, you can. Move on, whatever the case may be.
Many times, due to being understaffed in areas, it's more beneficial to the scene to fulfill other roles as well. You have it's a chain of command, just like if you take a day off or if you're off an extended period of time, certainly somebody would fulfill some of your roles at least, right? Same thing on our side. You have guys that step up to act in the battalion role at times. So if those individuals or any company officers fulfilling the duties, doing what needs to be done, maybe a safety officer role is what needs to be facilitated at that time, or an operations role. Interior operations is very often fulfilled by a battalion chief. That's in the mess with all the rest of us,
And it's
So
an
about the
operational
overall-
necessity.
And
Yeah,
for an
It becomes an
example,
operational necessity. You don't want to
Yeah.
take your lieutenant who's functioning with these 3 other people, who works with those 3 people, to go do work. Because if you only have 3 or 6 people or 9 people on a fire ground, you need 12. It doesn't make much sense to steal one of those people away and put them in command, and then we're going to stand next to them, or we're going to go to work. It really doesn't make operational sense.
I do.
Right.
Well, that's,
I
you're
get
asking
it.
the question, so that's the answer, is that ultimately it's about to have the people to do the job. We do the job. If I get on scene first, I'm not standing outside and just taking command and wait until people get there. I'm gonna go to work, I'm gonna break a window out, I'm gonna jump in a window and hopefully save somebody. So that's what we do. So just because we get there and take command does not mean we're operationally that much different than any other person on the fire ground. We just happen to be driving in a vehicle by ourselves, and it makes logical sense for us to take on that command role versus somebody that's driven there with 2 or 3 other people to get engaged in the operation. So we have that ability and that vantage point. But it really is irrelevant as far as that goes, because it's operationally common sense for us to do that.
No, it does. It makes sense for you to take, most of the time it would be you
Right.
taking
Right.
incident command. I was just trying to
And I
understand.
can't wear my air pack when I drive in an SUV.
Correct.
So in the fire apparatus, they can do that. And so they're ready to go right when
Yeah.
they get off. And so if I were to do that, I could. But like I said, if I get there first, I'm dressing out, I'm putting my air pack on, and if there's something that can be mitigated rapidly, like bending a window or opening a door, if that's feasible and it's operationally makes sense, then I'm gonna do it. So
And-
that's why our roles are so common. And again, that's where I think we have the disconnect, because you're asking us questions about actual things that you guys should all know, because that's who we are. We are your employees. And it's frustrating for us to have to convince you of who we are. You should know who we are. I think this document tells you who we are.
Well, I asked the question just for clarification because
Right.
I might know, but that doesn't mean everyone sitting at this table knows, or for the good of the recording, that people who listen to this are going to understand that. So sometimes that point is had so it can come across for other people, the public that we have to serve. It makes sense for battalion chiefs to take incident command. For the most part, that's why I was asking the question. I was more
Right.
trying to figure out when would there be times where it'd be feasible to do not. I do know that per some of your SOGs, battalion chiefs are required to respond to a certain level call anyways. It actually does specifically state that it is the other battalion's chief discretion as to whether or not they want to also respond to that call. So that's my other thing in terms of whether or not 2 battalion chiefs respond. If 2 battalion chiefs respond to a call, is it out of necessity, or is it out of the hey, I was there and available, so I just decided to ride on out?
Well, no,
It's call dependent as well. So-
It's definitely not
Operational
lackadaisical.
Yeah.
It's not just, hey, whatever.
Yeah.
It amounts to the fact that depend on the geographic location. So again, it doesn't make operational sense for me as the 2nd Battalion Chief to drive all the way
If he's
to
at
Rarity
Inslee.
Point.
Yeah, that's,
If
Right.
I'm at Ensley, Station 6 up there off of
so
Highway 29.
predominantly,
because
it should be
we're-
one battalion chief responding?
Well, no, it's not
No.
predominantly. It's because we're understaffed. Again, we come back to that. Realistically, there should be more battalion chiefs because our duties are substantial in that way. And so therefore, we have to divide and conquer. We don't have any other choice. And so we try to make the best decision based off of that small amount of personnel that we have. And so it makes it look like, yeah, we just have this great discretion, but in reality, we're making
But
judgment
you are
calls.
making the
And
judgment.
this
We
is-
have to, but you're
Correct.
forcing us to make
And
that
this-
judgment call.
This
We
is
don't
where
have a
it
choice.
really, this is where for me it separates us from everyone else. So people from the outside that come, as you guys, that come from somewhere else, a battalion chief, and it's happened with Rusty Nail when he was here. He was surprised, he's used to his battalion chiefs being sitting in the front of the vehicle doing command from the front seat of their car. That is typical, is it not, for what you've seen in the past?
Correct.
We don't do that because we don't have enough people on the fire ground. We are doing walkarounds, we are breaking windows, we are doing, once again, the blue collar work out there and not doing what the typical mindset of a battalion chief would be. And that's sitting and just telling you do this, you do that, you do this. That's why often dependent on call dependent, we will go to other calls, put the air packs on, go inside, do different things to be eyes on inside doing blue collar work. And that is where it ultimately boils down to, that if there's a perception for, and this is where it was difficult to understand when you have a new battalion or a new chief come in, they're so used to operating in a bigger city or bigger staff departments. When they look at our battalion chiefs and they're like, you guys bunk out and put SCBAs on and you go in the fires? And we're like, yeah. He's like, I thought y'all sat in the car and did, command from the dash, which is a common practice with other fire departments. We don't do that.
So you don't ever do that?
No.
We can't. We don't have enough people.
Ask the
Not
public
saying they
safety
don't.
director, have you seen me and Ike running around those buildings and stuff like that at fires? We do. We don't sit at the dash. There may be one of us that sits at the back of a vehicle, but one of the other ones doing a walk around, supervising other people that are around there. We may be going inside. Now, if it's a single wide trailer, there's only so many people you can put in there. But if it's a larger building, then I can't even count how many times as a battalion chief I've been inside of a structure.
I'll give you the example of what happened and the reason why we started having to make those judgment calls. Because 2 of us were at a fire at a multifamily dwelling, a quadplex in Cantonment in District 4. 2 of us were there, 2 battalion chiefs. We were running that incident. It was a working fire, legitimate. As we're starting to clean up from that fire, we're starting to de-escalate. The Perdido Key fire goes down. We burned down 15 or 16 buildings. Okay? So at that point, it was said, well, listen, we're so short-staffed, we have to have people, so you have to do the best you can to make a judgment call. Put us on our shoulders. It really should be on your shoulders, but it's on our shoulders to make that call, which sometimes is right and wrong. It's not one that I want to make because I want to help who's ever having to do the job over here, but we can't just completely abandon the rest of the county. It's 25 miles from Perdido Key to Pensacola Beach, and it's 60 miles to get from Perdido Key to Century and Pensacola Beach to Century. It's a huge area. And for us to be required to mitigate all of those incidents with just 2 people is also irrational. But then to say that we have to make the judgment call and it's our fault and therefore we change our job description because we get to make the judgment call is not correct either. We're being forced to make that judgment call. And so it is a toss-up sometimes. Do we go or do we not go? So if we have a whole apartment on fire, well, yeah, I'd probably better go. It's going to be 30 miles away, but it's going to be worth it because by the time I get there, there's still going to be work to do. And I'm not illegitimately or disrespecting or disqualifying the rest of the county based on that type of response. So that is what it is. So if you're looking because we get to make that judgment call, that's not correct either.
So if y'all were fully staffed in terms of every vacancy was fulfilled and y'all were operating at capacity, would y'all still have to operate that way where you would have to fully dress out and run into a
Probably if
fire?
you added 2 more battalion chiefs or 3 more battalion chiefs on duty 24/7, based on the geographic size and the size of the department. Sure, if you look at other departments, which you've worked other places, you've seen how many battalion chiefs they have on per square mile, and you just said how many fire stations you supervise. Well, in reality, 7's beyond the scope of duties. That's beyond. So you can see we're already stretched thin. So if you were to put on, then don't pay us overtime. Hire 4 more battalion chiefs 24/7 and don't pay us overtime, and change our job description. That's your balancing act. What do you want to do? Or don't agree and then we all go to a lawsuit and then you're paying all this back money and then you still don't hire battalion chiefs and we're still in the same situation we're in, or we're still understaffed and now you're paying us overtime, you know? That's the balancing act.
I want to correct you one thing, because you're talking about span of control, and span of control is 3 to 7, 5 minimum, or 5 optimal. But it's not ridiculous to think that you, as a battalion chief, that you'd be responsible for 7 fire stations. It's not. And Chief Harrison, I do want to say, yes, I have been to a lot of those fires. However, I've never seen a battalion chief put an air pack on and go in and do interior firefighting. So I just,
Right.
you pointed that out.
But you've only been to a couple, in fairness.
Yeah, no, in fairness, right?
We've been here for 20 years.
I've only, yeah, no, listen, I'm not saying every time, but you
Yeah.
pointed me out that I've been to fire scenes and I've seen this happen. I don't want
Sure.
the
In fairness,
The-
and that's
yeah.
why I said it was on a trailer fire, which is the specific one where you and I.
Right, right.
That's why I threw that out there. It said at a trailer fire, you're probably not gonna see both of us in there.
Well, and maybe, and obviously, we're not doing ourselves enough justice in that I still get calls from the volunteer fire chiefs to do stuff or asked to do things. So there's 18 firehouses in this county. And so realistically, it's more than 7. Well, you count the
23,
substations.
22, 21?
Count
They
the
all did. There's
substations,
district
they don't
chiefs. It's
count.
not just you. It's not like you have 35
Well, that's, I mean,
volunteers.
if we want to clarify that, then that's
No, but
fine.
the-
Then I just don't answer the phone calls. What I'm saying is we do that work as well. So that, it's not just 7.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sure.
In your SOPs, when a battalion chief responds and arrives on scene, are they satisfying part of the 2 in, 2 out?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I'm sorry, can you clarify?
It's called the IRIT. It's
Question?
basically if there's,
I
which
know,
we have
yeah.
made, crews of 3, right?
Right.
And so you're not allowed to make entry unless you have 2 in and 2 out. And so us arriving on scene satisfies the 4 to make it 2 in,
So
2
that
out. That's
Further
IRIT.
validates the fact that we're going in and they're counting on us to go in should something go wrong.
But when you have 4 people on scene, logically, you're only going to send 2 in anyways. You need someone who's at the very least operating the apparatus and pumping water, and someone who actually is taking incident command. So even when you arrive to satisfy the 2 in, 2 out, you might operationally be able to satisfy to allow 2 firefighters to go in.
Correct.
But you're still operating as incident command.
But he can't sit in his car in street clothes and
He
just
has to
talk
be
on
in
the
bunker
radio.
gear.
He has to be dressed
Yeah,
out.
once again, I'm
and-
physically
and
doing
available
stuff
to
with my
perform
hands.
in
I
all
am
the
now
ways.
going
Has
in
to.
and
A lot
I'm
of
putting my
district
air pack
battalion
on.
chiefs do
I'm
that
being the
as well,
second
though.
person.
There are fire captains that ride on trucks that won't put bunker gear on. They're company officers, but their role within their department, specific to their department, is to arrive and they do the talking. They take the command aspect, and the battalion chiefs are really nothing more than support when they arrive. So it really is, it comes down to the specifics of the department. You have to take that into consideration. And I think our history clearly demonstrates that the line battalion chiefs share a community interest with the line personnel way beyond what the administrative BCs do. And we've all had conversations, we've all discussed this and talked about that. Well, we haven't obviously, but I know you and I have talked about it. We briefly, I think, glazed into it. We've talked with Chief Williams, Chief Nail, Chief Grace. It's interesting to me that the point's made that we want to wait for the new fire chief to see what his opinion is.
His or her?
Yes. My recollection is we've not really done that, and there's nothing to really indicate that all of a sudden we're going to change and allow the fire chief to manage the department entirely at operational level that he or she sees fit. That has never occurred here, and there's no indication that that's what's going to occur here. So it is interesting to me that seems to be the choice when. Maybe this is over the line, but when he's good enough to be the interim fire chief and manage things, but his opinion on this issue does not matter. His predecessor, the previous fire chief's opinion, apparently didn't matter. I'm curious what Director Rogers' opinion, if it carries the same weight, you know. And I think that's what we're trying to get to is what's the stance and why, you know. So.
And let's not forget, all of this happens in what is the busiest firefighting fire department per capita in the state of Florida. one working structure fire every 24 hours. This place runs fire like nobody else.
Right,
it's a
so
lot
even
of
with that
activity.
being said, it just shows that we're more hands-on. Once again, going back to, we're doing stuff with our hands, we're out there working. We are not the person sitting in the vehicle
Well,
or
to
sitting in
Nick's
an
point,
office.
real
Sorry,
quick.
my apologies.
No, you're fine. Sorry. To Nick's point, in a meeting dated December 3rd, 2019, my notes reflect that JD, who was the interim public safety director at that time, who also, did he do volunteer firefighting? No.
In the day, back in the
Yeah,
day.
volunteer
Yes.
fire, yeah. So, but he has a fire background, he still knows.
That's
so.
arguable, but okay.
Loosely defined.
All right, and Chief Williams, fine. Think that the line chiefs are exempt, but the three others should definitely be pulled out into different classifications, maybe division chiefs, like the training, logistics, and fire marshal. So you asked about their
And that was-
opinion and whether or not it had any kind of weight. That is a note that I had from the very
Where is that
beginning.
documented at?
It was a note in a meeting, December the 3rd, 2019 meeting that we
So
had.
if I had a note from a conversation that potentially I had with a previous fire chief, that would classify as evidence as well? If it was just a handwritten note, or
Well,
is that a legitimate?
It was typed up notes from the meeting.
Well, I could type it up.
I know, but I wasn't the only one present that had the same note.
Okay.
There were 5
We've
people
asked for
present.
those things before. I mean, not, obviously not formally. We've asked for those opinions before, and everybody kind of does one of these, like, I don't want to talk about it.
Mhm.
But you're presenting that as written evidence that there are formal opinions from staff.
Well, I
Nope.
think that was part of what predicated the letter to the Department of Labor. That would have probably been before that, because that letter went in January. if I'm not mistaken. January.
It's mid-December.
Mid-December.
Mid-December, so it
But it
would've
was
been
after
previous,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was
Yes.
after that meeting. So no, I wouldn't, I'm not touting that as the definitive end-all be-all decision that I got from Chief Williams and JD at the time. The question was asked in that meeting, and that was the response that was given. Myself and 2 other folks heard it.
Gotcha.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm not saying that that's presenting as written evidence. It's just, that was one of the meetings, because I tried to get on this as quickly as possible. Been here less than a month at that point, had the meetings, and that's what was written down. I mean, well, I say written,
So,
typed up.
kind of to that point, okay, if we're gonna let hire a new fire chief, that person's gonna come in the door. One, you either wanna allow them this, 6 months to a year period, whatever, because they have to gather information, just as you had to get the lay of the land and weed through this as well, right?
I'm not
And
saying
certainly
we're gonna
this-
wait 6 months, though.
Well, no, but certainly this particular issue is not the only, definitely not I wouldn't assume be the largest priority that a new fire chief's gonna have to deal with coming in the door, right? They're gonna have their hands full with addressing a number of issues. So
I think they're
it's reasonable
interrelated,
to
though.
expect that there would be some time passed to get the lay of the land on this. And to facilitate that, regardless of the time allowed, to facilitate that, they're gonna rely on the administrative staff that they work with, their team. So they're gonna come to you guys for your opinions on the issue as well. That's just the way that'll go.
Yes, but it
You
should be
didn't come in the
fact-
door and make a
Correct.
decision, your sole own decision, like, y'all don't talk to me, I don't want your opinions, I'm gonna figure this out all by myself. No, you work collaboratively
Right,
with
but
your
it's
team.
fact specific and it's fact based. So garnering someone's opinion who's been in the field for, so many years is valuable, but that is not what any of the decision was made off of.
So
It
if it's
was
fact-based,
research.
can you present to us your facts that align with them remaining to be exempt?
So I think part of the
That's-
facts are based on some of the cases and other things like that,
Okay.
is that it's not clear cut. It is fact based. So, and it does appear to be, I guess, 50-50, or, as to whether or not they are exempt or not exempt, depending on, right, the
Right,
specific
and so
circumstances.
basically how
So
it
that's
boils
what you're
down.
saying.
Yes, ma'am. And
But
basic.
I want to ask a
Sorry, go
question.
ahead.
So, I don't know the timeline of when you all started being paid straight time for overtime. I'm sorry, I don't know that timeline.
Forever.
So y'all have always received straight time overtime?
So you've never been denied overtime?
They've
Straight
always
time.
always been exempt.
been exempt.
We've always
So
been
they've never
considered.
They've never got
paid
time and a half But the point that or the point of clarification she's asking is that most exempt employees in the
Yeah, we don't
county
get overtime.
do not get overtime.
Right, so-
I don't get straight time.
This is the weird thing. So now let's even dive into this a little bit deeper, which is going to be really weird for everybody. So you're exactly right. Exempt employees don't get overtime at all. We get straight time. So we're verifying the fact that we actually get more money. It's just whether it's time and a half or straight time, which is a little weird in itself. Furthermore,
Well,
we
do you
get-
know when that started?
that's what I'm
wondering.
saying, it's been that
It's
way.
always been that
Yeah.
way.
We have always gotten straight time, which is kind of weird. It's like, okay, so if you're exempt, but we're gonna treat you as exempt and non-exempt. Either you are or
So
you
that's
aren't.
not actually uncommon in fire
So let me
departments,
finish
though?
my
Okay.
point here. Exempt employees, how do you accrue leave? I don't know exactly how you do it, but it's leave banks, right? PTO versus a non-exempt employee, they get certain hours per pay period.
It's not based off their exemption status at all. One has nothing to do with the other. That's always been a misunderstanding of this county.
That's how it states
It's
in the,
classified versus unclassified. The classified services earn leave and accrue it a certain way. The unclassified services, who are truly at-will employees, accrue leave a different way. We have unclassified, non-exempt people who still accrue PTO.
so classified and unclassified does not work synonymously with exempt.
It
and
does
non-exempt.
Absolutely
not.
not. One has nothing to do with the other. That's another mistake that that is another misunderstanding that has been predicated throughout years. And I'm well aware that is not y'all's fault that y'all have that misunderstanding.
Right, so
That's a countywide misunderstanding.
That was also portrayed to us from the very get-go, which would made it more difficult to understand that
correct. It's very
classified
confusing.
employees were getting PTO, we were getting hours of leave and stuff like that.
A little bit of background here under.
Oh, well, maybe
when
Lorraine
I
can
came
answer.
into the unclassified employees were not under the Civil Service Board.
Correct.
So when you were classified, if something should happen, you fell under the Civil Service Board and they would be able to protect you a little bit more. Unclassified employees were hired in and they did not have the Civil Service. You didn't go through the Civil Service Board to get that
Get
position.
the job.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So
we
that
have
was what
something
the difference
similar.
was at the
We do
beginning.
have something similar in place now. We don't have the Civil Service Board any longer, but we do have the Merit System Protection Board, the MSPB,
Correct.
which again can also garner you rights. So that is a huge differentiator between a classified employee. Any ultimate employment decision, be it demotion, suspension, or termination, can be appealed to the MSPB or through your union if you're a unionized employee. Whereas when you're an unclassified employee, you do not get that appeal rights at all. So, technically Ms. Gilly could walk in tomorrow and be like, I don't like your hair.
Right,
But
sure.
to me, because I'm unclassified
And
and, I have
so-
no recourse.
Right, so I'd like to readdress Ms. Gilly's point in that you said it was a 50-50 shot, basically, when you were looking at court cases as to who was getting it, who wasn't getting it. And I think the reason that is because battalion chiefs in general are so diverse depending on the department. So you may have a department where the battalion chief is cockpit command. He sits behind his thing and he does nothing. And he may meet more of the janitor or managerial aspects of the FLS.
I
Yes, sir.
was saying that was for you.
Thank you. I figured we'd all get us a little laugh in
He
here. You're
did
more than
mention that
welcome.
y'all slept and
Yeah.
cleaned the station.
Just remember this when they show up at the station. next
Yeah,
time and
so
Mop sitting there.
I was about to say, I would like to stop by station and see
I
y'all.
will
You
gladly
can-
document
I've
it.
I've washed dishes. I've cleaned some counters.
So-
100% all the
100%.
time.
And that's where you're absolutely right. And so that's where we're saying, hey, we are on that 50-50 side of actually doing more with our hands. We can prove and show that we do more with our hands, and we're not the individuals that spend more time doing managerial aspects. And so that's why we have continued to ask this, because I would agree with you, through different court cases, it is a 50-50 shot. And I wouldn't be sitting here with all the research that I've done, even through some of the same things that you guys have done your research through. I wouldn't be sitting here if I thought it was a 50-50 shot. I know what we do because I'm sitting in the job. So I know from court cases that I've read, the people that are winning are the ones doing the blue collar majority of the time. And we are doing that on a large instance because of the way that we particularly run. And that's why I continue to bring it to the table, because that's what I'm seeing out there.
And you are correct, the burden of proof in cases as such is gonna fall more on, you all, because y'all's burden of proof is to prove that you do qualify for it, less so than our burden of proof. That's just how cases.
Right, and I think you show what your proof is in this document as well. This document states what you agreed with the lawyers and the union as to what we do, which is blue collar work.
So, I know you keep saying you, because you're talking about the county, but I would like to
You
clarify.
are the county, I'm sorry, I don't mean
Well, we're
yes.
all the county technically.
Yes.
But I would like to clarify that I was not here then, nor was I a part of that decision. Not that it would change the outcome. I
Right, it
don't know.
doesn't change the outcome.
But
yeah.
what Ms. Huell said is that was predicated off the information that they were given from folks at the time. So
Given for who gave you this information?
I believe the then HR director and the public safety director and I would think fire chief. I don't recall exactly.
Yeah.
I'm quite sure the HR director,
Right.
which was Eric Kleiner.
Right,
Who
but,
was Eric Kleiner?
was Mr. Mattamore involved with, wasn't
Yes,
he a
was.
part of this?
Yes, he was.
So he's kind of the one constant from the county side in this issue, really, right? I apologize, I'm not
I
sure
was
how long
not
you've been.
involved in that petition early on. I was
Right.
only actually involved at the very end,
Okay,
because
okay.
Mr. Mattamore would have been representing the county throughout.
So if he was representing consistently throughout that process, then he would be sharing those facts as well, right? I mean, or wouldn't he? And I guess what I
Well,
feel
he
like you're.
He doesn't live and work here.
No.
The information he would have is what he was given from Mr. Kleiner.
Right, so what I'm saying is he's gonna understand better than the county, administrative side as far as what the labor law, what the law is and right? So if Mr. Kleiner is, let's say Kleiner made bad decisions or bad recommendations on this, if he's making those recommendations to employed staff, and then I would think Mattamore would kind of throw the flag on and be like, hey man, what you're talking about is wrong. This is incorrect. Your opinion on this is incorrect. Because his job is to represent the county, to represent you guys.
I'm not sure where you're going with
What I'm saying is you're alluding to the fact that Eric Kleiner gave you guys bad information
No,
as
I
it
never
pertains
said
to
that.
this.
No, I never said that.
Okay, then why are we hearing that, well, I wasn't here for that, so, you
no,
can
that's
read it
not what
how
I
you
meant.
want
I
to read
was
it.
clarifying that I was not here for it.
Okay.
And the question was asked where their information, the county attorneys got their information from, and that's where Eric's name was brought up. They got it from there.
Okay.
Well, then my next question would be, after hearing from our side and understanding what we're telling you that we do, and I haven't necessarily heard any opposition from the other side of the table saying what we do, other than your one comment that you made, do you not change your opinion on whether we're exempt or non-exempt after hearing clear?
I don't think you're gonna get a from the hip answer on that. I just don't. I mean, that's gonna take something, we'll have to
There's
take
no
all
way
that
we
under
could make
advisement.
that correct at this. It would be unfair to anybody here to say what the hard and fast opinion is based off the information given. It takes more analysis in the background than just to say.
Well, with all due respect, we've been analyzing for 3 years. I know. We've been making this analysis for 3 years constantly with named people over and over and over again.
I get it.
So I have a question, and you do your research, and so I think you probably will have an answer. Are you able to extrapolate what the cost of this overtime to the county is?
Yes.
Can you give me that number?
If I have to look it up on my email. If there wants to be further discussion, I can pull it up. I have it somewhere in here.
Which
but yes.
number are you referring to? What the
cost.
general budget cost would be for, like, annual operations of the position? Or are you talking about the cost of
Faster than I can, but I-
back pay for these individuals, or what cost are you associating with?
Whatever you're asking. What's the cost? What you're asking for?
100 million.
That
Yeah,
doesn't
and then
surprise me
by time
from
multiplied
you.
by 6, basically. For if you're looking for all the battalion chiefs.
Yeah. Sorry, I woke up a little bit.
No, that's okay.
I will say this, one of the things I did plan to do like pre-COVID, but I had only been here for like 3.5 months at this point, was to do a true job analysis. That would have been on all of the fire department, not just the battalion chiefs. But a true job analysis would have garnered observation and interviewing of current incumbents to get a better understanding of the roles and responsibilities that were currently being done. So that was something that initially was planned. COVID threw all that out of whack.
I have some general numbers.
What is that? Go ahead, sorry.
Well, so so again, like Paul Donnelly referenced, if we get into a situation that creates litigation and the end result is back pay, which is a common occurrence in the situations where it's blatant that you're not providing us with the overtime. A 3 years payout just for me is $35,933. That's 3 years of back pay on overtime.
Can you say again?
$35,933.
Thank you.
3 years of overtime that I've done is 2,231 hours. 2 years of overtime was 1,692 hours of overtime.
And you were paid straight time for that.
Correct.
So
So that's a
and some of
calculation.
those figures are the 14 built in, so that, just to give you an idea of that as well.
Right. Now
Because we
that's-
don't, it's not that many hours, we get 14 built in, so he's throwing those in there as well.
Right, so that is with, that is ultimately with the time and a half, so that's the back pay. So I've already been paid the straight time, so.
Right, so we're talking halftime is what we were looking at for back pay. It would be a halftime for every hour that we worked, because we already received the pay for the first hour. And really what we're looking for from this point forward is the half pay, the halftime pay. We already received the full-time pay, we want the halftime pay from this point forward. So it's not, you're looking at less than that depending on who it is, because different people work different overtime hours. So I may work very minimal,
This calendar year, you've earned $13,000 of overtime.
right,
If I multiply that times 0.5, it comes out
Straight
about
time.
Straight time.
straight time, yeah,
Multiply that times 0.5. You agree? That's about $7,000 more.
right.
So far this fiscal year.
You talking about for the month of October?
No,
That's-
for the fiscal year.
For the calendar
previous-
year.
Our fiscal
Calendar.
year starts October
Calendar.
1.
No,
This is
sorry,
calendar
calendar,
year.
apologies.
Okay.
Sorry. No.
Yeah, I was.
You'd all be finding new jobs, right? You'll come work for us.
That's why I was asking her if I could be a battalion.
No.
And it's approximately
He said no, you
450
can't.
hours of overtime.
No, that's not what I was saying no to.
That's not right either.
I passed the CPAT. I could do it.
We're accepting applications.
There's vacancies.
And there's definitely not that type of requirement.
You totally stepped into that.
I did. I'm sorry.
That's just looking at yours.
So we,
Yeah, I mean, I can give you all of our hourly rates of pay. I'm $26.30 an hour. Chief Booth is $29.07 an hour. Chief Bobie's $26.38. Chief Harrison's $28.83. Chief Hollingsworth's $29.07, and Chief Isaacson is $29.07. So we work $29.20 is basically, that's our base pay. And then depending, some of us work between 1,000 and 300 hours overtime a year. I mean, myself, I work the most, and then Chief Booth, because I have 4 mouths to feed and he has 1. And again, these are hours beyond our normal.
hours beyond your normal.
Normal 29.20, you know, when,
Oh, yeah, you're picking up an extra shift.
yes.
Okay.
But some of the back pay was for the 14 built in.
Well, yeah, that's
Yes.
what, yes.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go out to answer your question with the numbers he gave as a very rough estimate, so please don't hold me to it. He said 35,000 for 3 years. That's 10,000 roughly a year, 12,000, whatever you wanna call it. So that would be times 6 battalion chiefs. He's the highest. He just noted on there that he was the highest on that particular
As far as
data
amount of
sheet,
time
amount of
worked.
time. So
Yeah,
not
the
everybody would be
highest.
10.
I mean, like,
No,
no,
not
he wasn't the
highest
highest.
earner.
No, the highest earner as it relates to overtime on that particular data sheet. So not every, like I didn't make $10,000 one year where he did. So I would say, once again, this is off the cuff, but from the numbers that he showed, you'd be looking at 60,000 or less a year to add the halftime.
How much less a year? Sorry.
I'm
I
estimating
know.
$60,000 a year to add the halftime. And once again, that's probably on the higher side, I would guess, if
And that's
those
with,
numbers.
and that's with the FLSA, meaning the 14 hours of built-in overtime and a 120-hour pay period.
I have a historical question for my own knowledge. Has anybody ever had to come up and be acting and get that pay in the last 3 or 4 years?
An acting battalion
Battalion
chief?
chief, yeah.
Yes, I just signed off on one.
Not for, no, he's in the office, he's managerial.
Campanella.
Campanella.
Okay, so
Logistics.
That's
going from
different.
lieutenant to a battalion chief?
Yes.
That's a different, that's not the same thing.
Not that I can recall off the cuff. I don't recall.
I'm talking about a line lieutenant stepping up to be a line battalion chief.
Not for
is
a
what-
long enough length of time to earn the pay. It's 5 consecutive shifts.
Right.
10
That's
count.
fine.
Yeah, not that I can recall offhand.
So the one we just did was for the,
Logs chief.
great, that makes sense.
Yeah. And another thing for you, Jana, was interesting is when you had sent out the email associated with the hurricane overtime spreadsheet. Within there, there's battalion chiefs that are listed as classified,
No.
unclassified.
Non-exempt.
No, it's classified and unclassified is the way you sent out the spreadsheet. And so within there, there's battalion chiefs that
No,
are
it was
classified and
non-exempt and exempt.
unclassified.
It was both non-exempt and
Whichever,
exempt.
and you highlighted the ones that should not be receiving overtime, and we were not highlighted. So I'm saying just within HR itself, there's a confusion on where we stand.
So that didn't come from HR?
Okay.
No, I mean, it did. It came from me. That report, that's why I highlighted stuff where it was,
Okay.
we found a lot of people, a lot of
You are
things in there.
classified in the system because their job class has them as a classified job
Correct.
class.
Right, but some of us are listed as exempt and some are listed non-exempt.
Well, and
depending on who
unclassified
it
as
is.
well. So if you look at Brask, Booth, Bowlby, Harrison, Hollingsworth, and Isaacson, you're gonna get different answers.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a
Right.
thing. But I actually like stipulated that when I sent it out to say that like some of the stuff is not reflected correctly.
I'm just telling you
I
that there's
just couldn't go
confusion all
through
the way
all of them.
around.
That's a system issue in terms of like what the system, have you ever worked in EFIN? No offense, I
And-
mean, it's just,
Yes,
We are
I
looking for a
have.
new system.
When were you?
then he can attest to like. oh,
He was
Lord.
very
It was
successful
Three
working
years
with it.
ago in May. So 3 years ago in May. So May 2017.
Yours looks like it'd be on there.
I have a question.
There's two
In,
of them.
in bargaining sessions that I have been involved in the past, we were allowed a time to caucus. Is that appropriate here or no?
I'm okay with that, absolutely.
Do you want us to leave, or do you want
Oh,
to
we
leave?
can leave.
We'll step out. I want to go to the
Okay.
restroom anyway, but
No.
Yeah, I was
could we
about to
take
say, I
maybe
was
10
kinda
minutes
like-
and let us
Sure.
caucus? We'll go back to my office.
That's fine. Yeah,
Paul,
thank you.
Paul, you can stay?
Okay.
All right,
He
very
gave
good.
you the thumbs up.
Thank you.
Double thumbs up.
What is it?
He walked back in the same
Same time.
Around the corner when you go.
We said we take it seriously,
Probably
guys.
that UF tie he has on.
What's wrong with that?
Okay, then.
I'm just
I
playing.
just pointed out that's what it was.
He is from
Unfortunately.
Gainesville.
Are you Gators fan? Are you?
It's
My
unnecessary.
graduate degree's from
I'll
there.
let you-
Oh, okay.
I bleed blue and orange on everything.
Crimson and white.
All right, did y'all start it back up? You ready? Okay.
Paul, I
You or me?
you, Jana.
Oh, Me? Okay. I'm sorry.
It's all
I'm gonna
right.
have to admit, my bad. So we did take everything that, all the information y'all have given us into, in fact, we spoke that length kind of a little bit longer than we intended to, so apologies for that. Just because we were having a really in-depth conversation about it. Long and short, we do agree that it does garner further investigation before any kind of hard and fast is made. So one of the things, and y'all asked for a plan moving forward, we're not going to prolong this out or drag it out because I do get the frustration and decision needs to be made one way or the other. Because the longer we sit on it, the longer everything builds. I get it. So one of the things is, I think Jason is going to ask.
So what I would like to do is take a single pay period and do a desk audit of the battalion chiefs. And if you're not, are you guys familiar with that process?
Basically what happens in a week's pay period.
Yeah, and what I'll do, actually, day by day, so you'll have, essentially, you work 4 days in a pay period, depending on where you.
4 to 5.
4 to 5, right. Yeah, so then what we'll do is, we'll set some parameters and go, okay, this is how I would like to have it documented. In your words, tell us what you did from 8 to 9 in the morning and that sort of thing. So it basically, it will give some insight into what the daily operations is in a 2-week time period for all 6 of you. And then that kind of gives us some meat and potatoes to kind of come back and look. Obviously, you've said a lot of things, the county has said a lot of things in the past and all that, so I just like to take a snapshot in time, and we can work that out probably this week and start it. When's the next pay period,
We
actually?
began Saturday,
So
just started.
it just started, so maybe preferable to do a whole pay period in one, we can say pay period XYZ or whatever, and start and do that through the next pay period, and then we can distribute that at the next meeting.
And
Next pay
then,
period starts Saturday, November the 14th.
The next one, November 14th, so
Saturday,
that,
November the 14th.
that would be the optimal time to do that, so.
does that intersect Thanksgiving?
It's the 14th.
We work on Thanksgiving.
I know
just to
y'all
let you
do.
know,
I was
so.
just trying
Yeah,
to
It's
we're a
okay.
ask.
It doesn't
24-hour
phase
operation,
this
we don't take
analysis.
holidays off.
Do what?
So,
We're a
She and I do
24-hour
too.
operation.
I was
She and
gonna say, I don't
They'll
take
come in
holidays
and
off
work.
either.
We work pretty much, I'd be more than happy for you to look at my.
No, I have my own nightmare to look at. on
Maybe
this
you
thing.
should
I
come
get
sit on
lost.
this side of the table so you can get some overtime.
That's what I said. I asked her if I could get straight time
Easy.
overtime, and she laughed at me. So-
Y'all going about this all wrong. I mean,
We haven't done our math right.
So concurrently with that is, I mentioned job analysis earlier. So desk audit and job analysis differ. Obviously, I think it's best to speak to each incumbent to have every person say, so everybody who operates as a line battalion chief, and even the ones in the administrative ones, the designated, well, I think you only have the training one filled right now. So long and short of it, just to talk and do the interview for that perspective, and then I would like to try to schedule just a few observations. I'm not saying I'm going to show up on fire scenes again, but to just come out to some, whatever your base of operations. Which that's another thing. What's the base of operation for? I know you've got a north and south end.
So one is at Ensley Fire Station on 29, and the other one is at Osceola on Massachusetts.
it's Osceola, yeah.
Tomato,
Yeah,
tomato.
Station 12 and Station 6.
Okay.
What did you call it?
Hmm?
What did you call it?
Osceola?
Osceola. I thought you said
He's
Osceola.
thinking, he's
Osceola?
contemplating.
No, you said OC.
That's what I just told her.
I was like, it's freezing.
And then
I
she
said it's Osceola.
tomato, tomato, potato, potato.
Halftime, straight time, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
And analysis is.
Anywho, the long and short of it, after both of those processes, and we are looking to wrap it up, like I said, not prolong. So by the end of November, we should have the desk audit and the job analysis done. That way, we'll have more meat and potatoes to say definitively, this is what's currently being done, and this is what all the incumbents said.
I think he's
You've
frozen.
scared him.
He does look kind of rather.
Paul, you there?
Yeah, I'm trying now, I've lost, I'm here, I just have to scream my.
All right, no video, that's okay. That's a good shot of you anyways. If you could use that for your next Christmas card, you'd be fine.
I had jokes now.
Something
He's
happened.
charging you by the minute.
Yeah.
Oh, he's turning in a minute.
No, that sounds good. I think what we'll do I would like to, scheduling can be kind of weird, so maybe what we should do is circle around with each other the next few days and find a date and time that will work at the end of November or beginning of December for us to get gathered.
Yes, because we would like to include Mr. Matamore as well, and he's not here to ask about his schedule.
Sure.
So beginning of December. Okay.
Okay, so maybe Nick take the lead from the firefighter side and in terms of getting dates that work for my team and his team, and then he'll coordinate with you. Is that okay, Nick? You think that'll work? Or?
Sure, sure.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you all.
Yep.
Thank you. Do we say go Gators?
Ugh.
Yes.
Roll Tide.
I'm a go Gators, so. Just have
Hey,
to.
the SEC. It's a good
That's right.
SEC,
conference.
that's fine. Y'all play in the weak division, it's fine.
Oh, I hope we meet y'all for this.
Who signs off on her time? I thought so.
You might be lucky to get straight time.
Be lucky to get time in.